The first match of the evening was about pride, but this second one is about survival. Both of these teams come together. Only one will advance to stage 2, China versus Indonesia. China just an absolute murderer's row in terms of performances in competitive Hearthstone. Jason Zhao, Nightwalk, Omega Zero, and Lovely Chuk taking on Indonesia, this up-and-coming team, a very spunky team. They're very proud to be representing Indonesia. Nexoc 40, Vertigo, Resdan, and Liga Game Joth. Liga Game, the team that Joth is playing for, so we'll just be referring to him as Joth.
It's just a bit of a mouthful otherwise.
Yeah.
And certainly China, one of the highest Hearthstone pedigrees in all of the Hearthstone global games. China came into this certainly as a frontrunner alongside United States, Canada, Ukraine, Russia, and the likes. And if you had told me that their Hearthstone global games life would be on the line in week number 10, I don't know that I would have believed you. This is certainly a strange situation for a team as talented as China to be in, but Indonesia has been pulling their own weight and been doing very, very well.
Yeah, it's very fitting that we end with Indonesia, considering that our very first broadcast for HGD North America also had Indonesia, and we've had the opportunity over time to kind of get to know them. And as is the case with a lot of these Southeast Asian teams, they're very much focused on their country specifically and how they can represent them and kind of bring that culture to the rest of the world. Because, you know, outside of the Hearthstone Global Games, how many times have you realistically gotten a look at Indonesian or say even Malaysian Hearthstone as a scene?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the Malaysian Major and the Thai Major, which these guys all really love to get together and compete at, there's not much. The Chinese scene versus the Southeast Asian scene, worlds apart. Yeah. China is one of the Hearthstone hubs of the world, and Southeast Asia is just sort of this still growing region. They've got representation, they've got tournaments, they've got passion, but they haven't sort of been able to bring it all together and find those results as of yet.
Well, definitely Indonesia looking to get this win today, move on to stage 2, and cement themselves as household names in competitive Hearthstone. China, a small note, Nightwalk was unable to make it and gave us prior notice, so he will be subbed in for by Lovely Chuk. And even without Nightwalk, again, all three of these players are well known in the Hearthstone Championship Tour, which, to make a small point, to make it to the Hearthstone Championship Tour, you have to, in some respects, be a paragon of consistency and someone who is not just winning one thing and then going to the big game. You have to keep winning and winning over time. And to that point, Omega Zero, 6 #1 finishes on the Chinese Hearthstone ladder. And if you don't know, China has a lot of Hearthstone players. So getting #1 finish just once would be an impressive accolade, but 6 times?
That's insane.
It's absurd. That's just how talented Omega Zero is.
No, and then the entire group is so experienced, so talented. They have so many hours logged in Hearthstone in every single class in every respect. And they're fan favorites all across the world. And then you look at Indonesia, and they don't have the same pedigree, but they've got the heart, and they've had the same results as China in the Hearthstone Global Games thus far. These teams are tied at a 2-2 match score. Whoever wins this matchup is going to move on. The loser will not. They'll be sitting in that 4th place spot in their group. So pedigrees aside, these teams are on the level playing field right now. They're in the same page.
All right, well, it's going to be Priest versus Druid in this first game. Lovely Chuk piloting the Priest, Resdan on the Druid, and Priest, you know, we talked at length kind of about how there's a bunch of different ways you can play the class. Druid also has a lot of different ways. I'm really curious to see how the approach goes in this week because, you know, as we've built up and as we've been saying, this is actually just for all the marbles at this point. It's, you know, win or stay home. So I'm very curious to see what decks they're valuing most, because if you look at what decks are mostly being piloted by players on the ladder right now, Aggro Druid certainly beats out Jade Druid, but yeah, it's hard to know what we'll see from that Druid. But I do want to point out Lovely Chuk, the last time he was playing Priest, actually was on the Silence Priest, which is the Humongous Razor Leaf, the Ancient Watcher. So certainly something we can glean from that.
That Silence Priest is certainly a lot of fun to play, has had some really good results in tournament play recently, but Priest is a very flexible class. You have a lot of different options within the class itself. You can play Miracle Priest, Combo Priest, Silence Priest, Dragon Priest. So it's very possible that maybe their tastes priest-wise have changed. Maybe they've decided to bring something else for this matchup because, like you said, you need to bring it all right now. This is the last opportunity. It's win or stay home. And maybe your Priest choice has something to do with that. Maybe it influences the course of this match.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like I said, Indonesia certainly has been very vocal about having a lot of passion for the Hearthstone Global Games. I do kind of wonder a little bit with China for a team this talented. I know that they are fairly busy. We've seen them being busy with the Hearthstone Championship Tour, and there's only so many hours in the day. But yeah, I really want to see China just realize, okay, we have expectations on the global level. We have fans back home who are rooting for us. I really want to see them just pull out all the stops here and really take this seriously and try to win. And yeah, we are going to see, we definitely know it is the aggro druid, and then probably going to be that same Silence Priest.
Well, we do see Silence. We see Priest. Put 2 and 2 together and you get Silence Priest, maybe. But it's possible they could have not Silence Priest.
All right, so early game mulligans for Indonesia. You're definitely going to be wanting to find those early minions. Maybe one buff. I'd say Mark of the Lotus might be keep worthy, but even then, you're probably just shuffling it back and looking for things you can actually play down on the board to start asserting the pressure early on. Priest in pretty much any build right now that you're running into, you can expect Potion of Madness, so that's something you need to be considering in your early turns.
This would have been a very different situation had this Druid been Jade Druid. Silence Priest is one of the best counters to Jade Druid in the entire game because the Druid has little to no single target removal for high health minions. So in that case, the Purified Priest would have been incredibly well favored. But even still, like you said, tools such as Potion of Madness can help keep your opponent off the board, and then if you can stick one large minion with large health, you've got Faceless Shambler for taunts. You do have your hero power just for limited amounts of healing. So you do have some resources to counter the aggression from the Druid. But if the Druid draws as well as I know it can, it's very tough for the Priest to combat that early aggression, especially since Potion of Madness picks up 2 attack minions, right? But every time you buff one of the Druid's minions, they're sitting at 2/3 because they're all 1/2s, Firefly, Hungry Crab, and the like. So Potion of Madness may not do as much work as you'd like it to.
You sounded like a disappointed parent there for a minute. You're like, I know Malfurion can draw better if he just focuses.
Like, if Druid draws as well as I know they can,
yeah.
Well, now they're drawing pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to say, they have the Vicious Fledgling, which is definitely the card on turn 3 that you just want to jam down as much as possible. It can just carry games on its own. But they were coming up a little short on the second turn now. Could choose to go ahead and apply Mark of the Lotus here, but just going to go wide on the board. There isn't really anything here that's a good Shadow Word Pain target. Potion of Madness is pretty much no gain
It's a bust
on this one. I want to point out now the Hungry Crab. This is the second time we've seen Hungry Crab tonight in a deck, and it's just flat out whiffed in terms of what it's targeting. But
yeah,
there are at least 3 decks right now that are running Murloc, so Hungry Crab used to just be something you were putting in your deck just to deal with the Paladin, but it's certainly seeing life against Shaman, some of the aggro druids that are running Bluegill, War Leader, Finja packages, and then obviously for the Paladin, where there are just a number of targets generally. Even the control versions, at the very least, have one
Hydrologist. Yeah, they absolutely do. So Acolyte of Pain comes down and can potentially net the Priest player multiple draws. If you're the Druid, there's no way that you're trading into this. So although Fledgling could have come down this turn, the Tar Creeper will prevent those multiple draws off of the Acolyte without, a Power Word Shield or a Divine Spirit, for instance.
Or just a Silence.
Silence, too.
Yeah. I mean, seeing the Acolyte of Pain, that pretty much actually just tells you that should be something either Silence Priest or just Miracle Priest in general. So you know that you can expect it. And there's the Silence, and that Acolyte of Pain manages to get around the protective Mama Tar Creeper and is able to feast upon the scrumptious little 1/2s. This is like, I need David Attenborough to narrate this. This is about to get vicious.
Tasty little 1/2s. Well, you hate to see a 1/5 for 3 mana, but when you can play Vicious Fledgling and Mark of the Lotus next turn, your 1/5 turns into a 2/6, and then I don't think you're quite as upset.
Oh, you play this down, and then you play the Northshire Cleric, and you heal. Oh, sweet googly moogly, it's time to draw cards.
Robbo, it's great googly moogly.
Is someone
I mean, it can also be sweet.
No.
I am the desk host. It will
Great googly moogly.
It will be what I say it is. All right, so a lot of value there coming in for China. Savage Roar.
3, 6, 9, 12,
3,
14,
6,
15,
9.
16, 17, 18.
A damn good time
12,
is what that
15,
Savage Roar
18.
is. Going to be able to get rid of the Acolyte of Pain and the Northshire Cleric. You can even apply a Mark of the Lotus there to make sure the minions that are not hitting the minions there can actually just hit a little bit harder on the face.
Yeah, you need to keep the Silence Priest off the board. If they can't stick a minion and then use their efficient buff tools, they simply cannot win the game. But in the same vein, you've got 5 minions, they've got 2. How worried are you really about them being able to do crazy things on 4 mana when you can just win the game next turn?
This was definitely the crossroads of destiny for Indonesia, and they're thinking, okay, well, we can go ahead and get rid of these minions, but if we leave them up, in order to draw at least that second card, the mana is going to have to be committed into the heal.
Yeah.
So you're reducing what else they can possibly do. That's 2 Potions of Madness. That's 1 Shadow Word Pain, Radiant Elemental, Hijinks, potentially. But they're basically just saying, okay, we are willing to lose so much here, but we think that getting a 4/4 Vicious Fledgling down is very important. And they wanted to save Savage Roar for the win condition when they were going wide on the board, but those 2 Potion of Madnesses just came up huge.
That was...
That was a risk. That was a risk they took.
It is.
That was the potential downfall of the line they made. And, you know, obviously we can see all the cards, so internally I'm screaming a little bit that we didn't Savage Roar, but I certainly understand where you want to save that Savage Roar to be your win condition, and you're saying they probably don't have 2 potions. Because you made a 4/4 Vicious Fledgling, which, in your mind, was probably going to stay alive.
Impervious to pretty much everything.
Or was going to eat the Acolyte of Pain and the Northshire Cleric off the 1 Potion of Madness. So I don't hate it. It's just a little bit unfortunate how it's paid out.
Savage Roar in this deck operates very similarly to Bloodlust in the Shaman. Yes, you like to finish the game with these cards. These are great finishing cards, but you need to take the damage where you can get it. Savage Roar now, maybe you have a Swipe Tack in your deck and you can just finish the game with that. Or, you know, a Druid of the Claw attacker, some form of charge minion. You need to take the Savage Roars where you can get them, and if you didn't think that you were going to have more than 4 minions on board, maybe now was just the time.
All right,
then
so
again, it's kind of hard to deny Fledgling plus Mark of the Lotus on 4, so that's a tough call.
All right, well, Indonesia has the opportunity to go ahead and just clear off the active minions and say, okay, I'm going to protect the Vicious Fledgling or make them have another Silence in the effect of either the Silence spell or Purify. And just choosing to go ahead and jam some damage here looks like base. Kind of a halfway play here. Again, they're okay, I think, with China committing mana to getting value off the Northshire Cleric, because I think they just want to start pushing damage. Rezdan, unfortunately, looking a little bit bemused with the situation, but yeah, this is just why this deck can be so powerful against aggro.
Man, this was not the way that I expected this matchup to go. Those Potion of Madnesses, they came in huge. Without those, China would never have been able to stick a minion. And granted, Rezdan did maybe get a little bit greedy, could have cleared off the minions on board.
It's not even a little bit. He frankly took
a lot of bit greedy.
He took a fairly greedy line, and I don't necessarily say that I disagree with it. There's certainly a point as the aggro player going into a deck that has a lot of good removal tools where you just say, caution to the wind, I have to win this.
Yeah.
But this is what can happen.
It's very unlikely that China had 2 copies of Potion of Madness in hand and that they would have access to them in that case. But those outlier scenarios do happen every so often, and well, let's just say if Indonesia could have gone back, I think they would have done it very differently.
Well, I'm sure if every time in Hearthstone you took a gamble that didn't pay off, you could just Prince of Persia, Sands of Time yourself back 5 seconds. You probably do it differently, but yeah, you ultimately have to take a risk in this matchup sometimes, and now Indonesia back on that let's trade a little bit play and just try to get board control back, but they are obviously running very light on resources and hoping for a living mana, hoping for the Bitter Tide Hydra, just something that complicates his board state.
Living mana could still close up this game easily. Silence Priest, maybe you have a copy of Holy Nova, but it's not completely necessary. So if you can stick a living mana, then the Priest doesn't have much power on board, you can still absolutely win this game in 2 turns.
All right, well, they could just go ahead and choose to put down the Humongous Razor Leaf and the Ancient Watcher. You have Purifies for them on the next turn. You could also use the Cabal Song Sealer to accomplish something on the next turn. All right, just going to go ahead and choose to buff this, and then Inner Fire, looks like. Now, you can't Inner Fire because you have to silence it first. So that is kind of a little bit of a weird thing there, that you feel you need to get the card draw going there on a minion that is going to have to be silenced. They're not losing too much. They're effectively just losing 2 health, and they get to draw a card. So I don't necessarily hate it, but it is kind of a weird situation because Do you really feel like, what are you trying to draw towards?
It's weird. It seems almost like you're working against yourself, but Power Word Shield versus Divine Spirit, which would you rather have? I'd rather have Divine Spirit, so it does make sense to draw more towards that or to draw towards additional cycle to get the Divine Spirit, which you could then just close the game out with. I don't know that the Power Word Shield would have necessarily been the most important card. I think that the draw here is definitely more valuable, but it feels weird, doesn't it?
Well, maybe it's stuck in there because the next turn you're just planning to use all your mana on maybe Song Stealer and Purify. So you're saying, like, when am I going to get that card draw? So if you operate under that assumption, then it certainly makes sense.
Well, Lovely Chook will either need to commit an Inner Fire this turn or use both attacks to get through the Tar Creeper.
Still have to silence, yeah. You still have to silence the Humongous Razor Leaf as well, and I think at that point, why don't you just Inner Fire it?
Yeah, you can Purify and Inner Fire, get through Tar Creeper, clear off the other Tar Creeper. I almost forgot it was a Tar Creeper because he doesn't have Taunt. Tar Creeper in disguise. Disguised Tar. Next big Twitch streamer. Ooh.
Shadow Word of Pain, pretty juicy there.
That's a great draw.
Yeah, you can actually just full clear. Nope, you can't full clear. Yeah, you can because you silence both the minions. So yeah, just full clear the board here and then
hit him for 10.
No, I think we kill the crab every time.
Ugh.
That crab's too dangerous to be left alive.
Yes, it's a very dangerous crab, but there is something to be said for denying your opponent additional time. If you had Inner Fired and hit for 10 this turn, you could have set up lethal for the next turn, and then I think you kind of had a read that your opponent doesn't have anything useful from that one card in hand. Maybe if you give them an additional turn, they have time to draw living mana.
Mark of Yasiraj.
Yeah, true.
I think there are a number of reasons at this point to just play it safe. You can continue. You now have a board that is more than big enough to just deal with anything they put down. Even if the Hydra came down, you had the Inner Fire.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily need to rush this. So, yeah, the Shambler is just going to be huge here.
Ooh.
Yeah, Indonesia. We see Rezdan shaking his head, but this is unfortunately what happens when you make the kind of greedier lines and it gets counteracted decently.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, the play that Indonesia made would have paid off in spades, and they probably just would have won on the back of it. They could have had Savage Roar next turn, the Fledgling could have netted Wind Fury, the game could have been over by turn 5.
Well, now the game's going to be over by turn 9, so, you know.
Yeah, just, in the favor of your opponent.
Sure.
So, unfortunate, but that's just how the game works out when you take big risks that have great rewards, but also great, fallbacks if you do get punished.
All right, well, Rezdan being allowed to choose the manner of his Druid of Death and just goes ahead and swings into the Shambler.
I do think that is the most flashy of the Druid Death choices there. China going to take game number 1 with the Silence Priest, looking pretty confident, as I would expect them to be.
I love watching Jason Zhao's face. Every single time I've seen him compete in Hearthstone, his mannerisms are so just like, yeah, this was automatic. This was easy. Even when he's losing, like, I don't think he knows he's losing. It's just like, got it. It's
he's
like Tom.
Confident up until the moment that he's dead. And he's like, oh, I've lost.
It's like Tom from Taiwan. It just always looks like, yeah, I'm just going to win. I'm just going to win the video game.
They make it look easy. And you know what? The ability to stay calm under pressure is definitely very valuable in Hearthstone. It's something that, especially these guys who are on those big stages with high stakes very frequently, you need to be able to not change your play from when you're sitting in your pajamas, drinking a cup of coffee in the morning playing Hearthstone. Gotta have that same patience, that same confidence.
Yeah, and China really just executed there very well. They were kind of offered up that game around turn 3 or 4 by Indonesia, who pretty much said, if you don't have the check, we win. And China's like, well, I got a bunch of checks here.
I got it all.
Yeah, they had the card cycle in the early game, which is very important because that deck is just so jam-packed full of reactive resources and methods of just beating out aggro decks. So China being able to dig a little bit deeper into that Silence Priest was big, but game number 2 going to be Omega Zero piloting the Paladin, and it is going to be Vertigo on the Warrior. So the Paladin we saw from Omega Zero the last time we saw China play, it was just the standard Murloc Paladin, nothing super fancy there.
It's possible that they've chosen to go with the more aggressive variant like we saw earlier today coming from Vietnam, but the mid-range Paladin still has a lot of advantages. You do have that sort of fallback plan of the mid to late game that maybe you don't have with the very aggressive Murloc Paladin. So certainly against a Quest Warrior, for instance, having Tyrion, having Curator, having Stampeding Kodos, very, very good. But against a Pirate Warrior, maybe you would rather have more early aggressive Murlocs to be able to fight the early board with.
All right, so I do believe Fertigo as well played Control Warrior last time, so he was playing that Quest Warrior. So if this ends up being Murloc Paladin into Quest Warrior, the Murloc Paladin can still get a lot done just through the ability to continue to generate extra resources off the Stonehill Defenders, off the Getaway Kodos. But if the the Quest Warrior can get things generated a little more early on and kind of get the quest and then set up with a brawl, then they're certainly in a very favored position.
Yeah, absolutely are. Ultimately, it all depends on what type of classes these two teams have actually chosen to bring. It's very difficult for us to speculate when you have different classes that have so many different archetypes that are very flexible. Whereas I feel like pre-Year of the Mammoth, pre-Ungoro meta, it was it's Shaman, it's Jade Shaman, it's Warrior, it's Pirate Warrior, it's Paladin, why are you bringing Paladin? There was a lot of just definitive, this is what it is, this is what it's going to look like. But now there's a lot more questions. We don't know exactly what these teams have decided to bring. Obviously, deck lists are not open, and there is so much variety within the meta right now.
Yeah, very flexible, but just as a reminder, whoever wins this series does get to advance to Stage 2, so let's go ahead and take a look at the group standings thus far. We see Bulgaria and Brazil have wrapped things up nicely in the 1-2 spot, and it's that third spot that's being battled for. China currently on top just in terms of game record, but this game will decide it. Whoever wins this will be advancing on. We see Sweden and Switzerland are already eliminated.
Brazil.
Worth pointing out
Who
here.
said that?
Yeah. Worth pointing out that the casters at the beginning, or some of us rather, at the beginning of the Hearthstone Global Games, went ahead and each chose a team that we thought were going to make it. You chose Brazil.
Oh, did I?
I chose Canada.
Would you look at that? They're going to make it out.
Raven chose South Korea, and then Saddle chose Russia.
Fans of Saddle and fans of Russia. Hate to see that one, Rob.
Well, it was a very safe pick, to be honest. Shan Udachi had already delivered for Saddle.
That's true. He couldn't possibly not go on the Stan train. You just, once he's already gotten you that win, you just keep riding it all the way home. Unfortunately, Russia will be staying home.
Saddle's got a room just full of pictures of Stan Udachi. That
he has an altar to him in his closet, some candles.
Saddle, it's not doing it justice to say Saddle is a fan of Stan Udachi. So understand that pick completely. But yeah, the rest of us were able to make the picks that did make it through. So in a group of myself, Raven, and Saddle lost.
Man. I don't normally feel like an intelligent person when I'm standing next to Saddle. He just has that aura that makes you feel real dumb sometimes. But I'm gonna keep this one close to me. I'm gonna hold on to this one, and I'm gonna let it guide me through the rest of my Hearthstone casting career.
Well, we all have the things we hold tightly.
Y'all got to get those little victories,
So as you can imagine, here we are actually just waiting on the players to be ready. We're not regaling you.
We don't toot our own horns quite this much, at least not on broadcast usually. This is a rare occasion.
Yeah, not regaling you with Cora's feelings because that's a conscious choice we're making.
No. I like to keep those very bottled up. It's just the play.
That's me, all right.
Poor Rob.
No.
I'd pat you on the head if it would not be weird. Very weird.
Yeah, so going into this matchup, though, I spoke to Nexhawk40 just like the slightest bit there.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was just waking up and over in Indonesia, so he didn't necessarily have a whole bunch of time to talk, but, I asked him just straight up like, hey, are you guys going to win this? And he said, yeah, just 100% they were going to win this. They felt extremely confident. Going to have a little bit of a time now trying to do that, being down 0-1 against China. And China is certainly, as we talked about a little bit earlier, a very intimidating foe to go up against in a decider match where if you lose, you're out of the tournament completely.
Definitely a lot on the line for both of these teams. But I love rooting for an underdog. I love seeing the lesser known players succeed, especially on large stages like this. China, aside from the Hearthstone Global Games, they have very well-defined Hearthstone careers. They have unlimited opportunities in the Hearthstone Championship Tour and all of the China versus EU and China versus NA tournaments. You're not going to see the last of the Chinese Hearthstone team right here. But for Indonesia, maybe this is sort of the extent of the opportunity that they have right now, other than, like the Thai and Malaysian majors, for instance, that you were talking about previously. So I would really love to see them win, to see them get a chance to continue furthering their careers and really letting the world get a chance to get to know them, to get to know who these 4 guys are from Indonesia, what's the Indonesian Hearthstone scene really like, and what do they have to bring to the table. Whereas we already know a lot of what China has to bring to the table, and it is a feast.
Yeah, I mean, Indonesia, this is for regions that are a little bit less well-known and have a little bit less infrastructure. The Hearthstone Global Game serves as an opportunity to, at the very least, start kind of carving out that infrastructure. You get together, you're hanging out in real life, and maybe you weren't before. We have seen some of these teams are going off and playing in majors together as friends, but this can be the start of more fireside gatherings, more local tournaments. There are a few cups that take place over in Southeast Asia. I want to say the Siam Cup was one I was kind of looking into. And there are teams starting to kind of spring up. But again, with the lack of the big-time global success, a lot of these teams are kind of looking this as their first foray into, okay, how do we have that breakout performance that lets the world know who we are? And yeah, getting to stage 2 would definitely be big for a team like Indonesia. Whereas for China, it's just, as the narrative goes, it's the expectation.
Yeah.
And if they don't make it, you have to imagine at least certain pockets of the competitive community and Chinese fans are going to be disappointed.
You're going to be very surprised, especially since the Hearthstone Championship Tour championships are going to be in Shanghai, China, coming up next month. China would certainly love to have this win in their pocket going into that, knowing that they're moving into the second stage of the Hearthstone Global Games, which by then will be well underway, and stage 3 will even begin to be decided by that point. So a lot on the line for both of these guys. Or both of these teams, excuse me. I'm so used to saying guys because it's usually just, it's usually just a 1v1. But the team tournament aspect of this has made such a big difference, I think, to the overall results that we have been seeing. Whereas teams like Russia came into this, we expected big things from them, and China as well. But teams with very big personalities, with players who have a lot to say and like to be in charge of their own games, and maybe that's been a reason why they haven't been performing as well as we expected, whereas teams with lesser known players that don't really have a definitive leader have been able to really embrace the spirit of the team tournament aspects and be able to work together on this to find success.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of theories as to why things go the way they do, especially in stage 1 of this tournament. But just to give you guys an update, we are almost ready to hop back in. So let's go ahead and take another look at the match played here. We saw Lovely Chuk get that first win with the Silence Priest against Rezdan in Indonesia's Aggro Druid. So in a good position here going into game number 2, Omega Zero on Paladin versus Vertigo on the Quest Warrior. Again, if you're kind of looking to judge what they might be bringing based on prior performances, Omega Zero has been playing that Murloc Paladin, where Vertigo has been playing that Quest Warrior. And I think Vertigo has actually most of the tournament been playing it. It seems to be kind of a comfort pick for him. Mm-hmm. He seems to really enjoy that deck. And in its own respect, while it's a little bit linear and can certainly suffer from a little bit of the syndrome of being a solved deck, more so than other decks in the format, it is incredibly powerful if it actually has the time to get going.
That it can be a big if. Certainly the version of the deck that we are seeing now, more so than the version that came out right after Ungoro release, Ray C's variant, for instance. The variant that we're seeing now has more taunt minions overall, so there's less of a failure rate. There's less of a chance that you draw your removal and your whirlwind effects because there's just simply less of them in the deck. There's more taunts to compensate for the fact that the deck was whiffing. Maybe 15-20% of the time you just weren't getting the taunts you needed to complete the quest, and the whole deck is reliant on completing that quest to actually win the game. So it's become a lot more consistent, but yes, there are still those certain situations where you don't have the time to really complete that quest or get what you need going.
And Paladin can certainly, with the kind of more standard Murloc version, pressure very early, and then suddenly you have to expend resources in a suboptimal manner. And don't get me wrong, Warrior has a lot of board clears. Sleep with the Fishes, Primordial Drake, Brawl, Ravaging Ghoul, Whirlwind. There are just so many things that have synergies that lead into clear boards. But if the Paladin is able to put pressure on you, A, before you have the ability to draw them or the mana to play them, or B, it's just continuing to snowball threats, get extra value from Stonehill Defender, from Getaway Kodo, from Spike Ridge Steed. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong for the Quest Warrior, despite how powerful of a deck it is, and despite the finality it brings in the form of that hero power.
There absolutely is. And if it is a more controlling build of the Paladin, yes, it's going to go later into the game, but that's the point where even if the Warrior has had time to complete their quest, then the quest has a failure rate. It is a random effect. It deals 8 damage randomly to an enemy character, and if the Paladin has built up a board of, just a couple of 1/1 minions, a couple of those hero powers, then the hero power from the Warrior doesn't get the job done. But forget everything that we said, because it is going to be a Pirate Warrior for Vertigo. And we can see the Spellbreaker tech, which likely means there's only 1 copy of Mortal Strike in the build. And the Grimscale Chums for China does indicate that this is going to be an aggressive Murloc variant.
All right, Hearthstone officially comes to a close.
Yeah. I feel like I should have written a speech and delivered it right there. Not that anybody would have listened still, but
I would listen.
It would have been at least a little organized. Thank you, Rob.
But because I
get
have
paid to do that.
Well, I'm have to because I'm on the desk.
Well,
here.
yeah.
If I walked away, people would say things. All right, so early mulligans
Feels
here.
bad.
Omega Zero choosing to get rid of the Grimscale Chum.
Blasphemy.
Yeah, the Grimscale Chum and the Cold Light Seer definitely tell us that this deck is more predicated on the early game Murloc synergy. It's not just kind of in there to be in there like we sometimes see from the Murloc Paladin. Indonesia going to really want to keep that Fiery War Axe and then find some early curve minions to help establish board dominance. And that is, as a hand goes, I do not rate that one super highly. Leroy and Arcanite Reaper are obviously very powerful, but you really kind of want them later in the game. And with Omega Zero in China playing this early curve Murloc Paladin from what we can see, this could spiral out of hand very quickly if a certain 2-drop Murloc comes off the top of the deck for China. It's Rockpool Hunter.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, yeah, I don't.
I was like, could it be Hydrologist? Could it be Rockpool Hunter? Which one do I go with? But you've confirmed it. It is Rockpool Hunter.
All right, well, the Fire Axe is going to make sure the Rockpool Hunter threat never actually manifests anyway. And this is a pretty straightforward turn with 2 mana. Now, the interesting thing that is much less straightforward is whether or not Vertigo feels he has to use the War Axe to just go ahead and get rid of the Murloc to play around potential Murloc synergies. That Axe charge is incredibly important.
That's a really horrible reality, but something you really need to worry about.
I mean, he's going to be able to put down the Corsair, so the Rockpool Hunter is suddenly a little bit less menacing. But if War Leader comes off the top,
Rockpool Hunter coming down doesn't really matter quite so much. And War Leader coming down, you still kill the War Leader and you're left with just a 1/1. So actually, forget everything I just said. No, because you're playing the Corsair this turn. What am I even talking about? So War Leader comes down. Yes, you're getting punished if you are running into the face of the War Leader.
But that's the thing is, we obviously see that Omega Zero does not have the War Leader in hand. But when you're playing against this style of Paladin deck, and to be fair, Vertigo doesn't even know that this is one that's more focused on the early game because all he's seen is a Vilefin Inquisitor, which is included in the mid-range build. It's a situation where he really has to give some thought over everything he does.
Rob, we forgot about Patches. We just Talkstoned for so long that we forgot that Patches is a card.
It's a long time. There is that Rockpool Hunter, though. Unfortunately, no Murloc to buff.
Was a bit of a weak start for the Pirate Warrior, but they have managed to get the board control. And when in the face of 2 aggressive decks, it is going to be a battle for the board in the early game. The Pirate Warrior does it quite well on the back of those weapons, and then at some point you do need to turn the tide. That's where the charge minions and the Arcanite Reapers and the Heroic Strikes start coming in very, very hot. So if the Warrior can keep the early Murloc aggression off the board, they can then dictate the pace of the game, and that's when it's very difficult for this style of Paladin deck to come back.
So different options here that certainly are good at different points in the game. I don't dislike the Tar Creeper here. I think it's kind of a long shot at this point, thinking that against the Pirate deck, you're going to get to the Tyrion and really kind of get the value that makes it so strong. So I do like the Tar Creeper here. One issue, though, is by virtue of not getting a potential 4-mana taunt, say Ascension Shieldmaster or something, he's going to be forced to play a little bit inefficiently if he chooses to play it next turn. This is also kind of an inefficient turn for Vertigo, though, because it looks like he's probably going to just have to plug in 2 damage sources into the body of the Stonehill defender unless he wants to give up the heroic strike, which I don't like giving up the heroic strike here. I think there are far better uses for it. You get to keep the Dread Corsair.
I think, personally, I would be inclined to hold everything and wait for either the Kor'kron or the Naga Corsair next turn. That does open up Vertigo to be punished by Blessing of Kings coming down onto the Stonehill defender.
But that's not really an inclusion you tend to see very much. And as Vertigo and Indonesia know right now, there's nothing funny going on in China's deck. Everything they've seen feels extremely conventional.
Yeah.
So they're actually just, going to go ahead there and just look to kill it over 2 turns. And Blessing of Kings now is going to have the opportunity to do some work.
So going to go buff up the defender to a 5/5 if that's what Omega Zero chooses to do, which means that Vertigo will still be able to kill it off with the Fiery War Axe next turn. You get a little bit punished because you lose your Corsair in the process. But you are drawing out that Blessing of Kings from being played on a minion with taunt that maybe you can't automatically deal with.
Now, Tar Creeper is an option here. There's really no good Murloc synergy. It's essentially just Hero Power Rockpool Hunter, but Tar Creeper could also come out and puts up a big wall that you expect another 2 sources of damage to have to chew through. But then there's the rest of the 4 mana that Indonesia's going to have access to, and you kind of already got lucky once with that turn kind of being a whiff for Indonesia. How much do you really want to press your luck there against Pirate Warrior?
I mean, the fact that Omega Zero didn't see Frothing Berserker or Bloodsail Cultist coming out for Indonesia that turn was very, very big. It's incredibly unlikely that if Vertigo doesn't have 3 drops, that he doesn't have a 4-drop next turn. They're 2 very saturated mana slots for the Pirate Warrior.
I've never heard saturated mana slots, but I like that.
Thank you.
That's good.
I felt like, I don't know.
Like a person who knew words?
Yeah. Felt like a Nathanism.
All right, well, China choosing to go wide instead of the Blessing of Kings. So had they gone Blessing of Kings, the Blessing of Kings would have traded into the Dread Corsair and then likely also traded into the last swing of the axe. But they're just going to go ahead and choose to go wide. Kor'kron Elite is really kind of worst case scenario there. They could have kept the axe and just gotten the value trade with the Kor'kron. Instead, they're going to go ahead and just fully clear the board. And if the Paladin has Consecration right now, then it's not even really that much of a win. You're clearing the board, and then the Pirate Warrior gets to reload.
They get to Reaper on 5, and
I don't know. What do you think of that turn? What do you think of that turn going wide instead of using Blessing of Kings?
I mean, playing the Kings, you were checked automatically by the Fiery War Axe, so your opponent was still going to be able to develop. So I think ultimately it accomplishes the same goal. It's the difference between leaving the Corsair on the board and not leaving the Corsair on the board.
It's the difference between a 3-1 and a 4-1 or just a 4-3. And I guess if they'd had a Consecration, I think I understand this line a little bit better because you're saying, okay, we're going to Consecrate, and then if we draw a 1-mana Murloc, then it's not a bad turn at all. But they didn't draw that, and they don't have Consecration, so...
At the same time, now Stonehill plus a Hero Power checks these minions. Sure. Whereas a 4-3 on the board, Tar Creeper would have checked it. So really, in both instances, you do end up accomplishing the same thing, but in this instance, you get to keep Blessing of Kings, and you lose Rockpool Hunter. But maybe that means that on turn 7, you can play Tar Creeper plus Blessing of Kings. So if you go Sunwalker into now Tar Creeper Blessing of Kings, that's a lot of taunt health for your opponent to have to go through. So I really just think it was the Blessing of Kings being more valuable to China later on.
Yeah, definitely a lot of ways you could have approached that turn, and now Indonesia has the opportunity to go ahead and get through the Stonehill defender. They have to lose the Kor'kron Elite, but they can protect the 3-1 Dread Corsair with the upgrade if they choose to. Would have to forego equipping the Arcanite Reaper. So it's really kind of how much do they want to put their foot on the gas, basically.
You also can South Sea Captain this turn, trade in the Corsair into the Stonehill.
Sure.
And then you could upgrade to clear off the 1-1, try to save your Corsair, but I think turn 6 Reaper plus upgrade is almost too good to deny. So Captain Hero Power maybe, and ignore the 1-1 Murloc.
I think I like Captain.
Yeah. How much do you want yourself to hurt in the face of Megasaur? Well, this is a check to that.
Wow, choosing to get rid of the Heroic Strike just so on the next turn he can have the Reaper and then the opportunity to upgrade it, so. Wow, ropes out, and
Oh.
unfortunately the Korkron does not get to connect there. So Vertigo really down to the wire considering his turn.
That's bad.
Still in a good spot, though.
Yeah,
It's worth noting that Vertigo is still in a very good spot here.
He loses
still
4
has the
damage,
board.
but Reaper upgrade is still 18.
And again, Vertigo continues to act under the assumption that this is just kind of your standard Murloc Paladin that he's just kind of beating off the board.
It's just, honestly, it's kind of sloppy play. You don't want to see that at this point in this tournament when there's so much on the line for Indonesia. You would like to get every bit of damage in that you possibly can. It does look like maybe there's some other people running around his house right now. Maybe he's a bit distracted, but he does look like he's hurting a little bit after missing that 4 points of damage.
All right, well, Hydrologist comes down. So that's interesting. Sunwalker could have actually just been the play, and Divine Shield is typically very strong against Warrior.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know that the upgrade is there for Vertigo, so Vertigo could just choose to leverage his HP as a resource if he just wants to get through it without sacrificing a minion, but yeah, Sunwalker goes ahead and stays in the hand.
Okay, so Vertigo, we know, can clear off this Tar Creeper with the Arcanite Reaper, but would likely want to hit in with the South Sea Captain first to proc the Noble Sacrifice. Thing is, if it's not Noble Sacrifice and you run in South Sea Captain, you lose South Sea Captain and still will probably need to hit in with your Arcanite Reaper into the Tar Creeper. This is a deceptively difficult turn to sequence.
Knows at the very least that he wants to get that Arcanite Reaper online and wants to get it upgraded. Yep, and there's the Noble Sacrifice, so does get a little bit caught here, but I think you were always going to toss in that upgrade just for the purposes of mana efficiency, so I don't think there was necessarily any value to holding it back before testing. But yeah, this is just a situation now where he was really just hoping it wasn't Noble Sacrifice, and it was Noble Sacrifice.
I think Noble Sacrifice is going to be the first choice for China, and maybe Getaway Kodo, maybe Redemption. You certainly need to keep those in mind.
I think with the health of the minions, you were always first choicing that it was going to be Noble Sacrifice.
Noble Sac.
Yeah. You had the 3/5 up there, so I definitely think Noble Sacrifice was probably the thing you wanted to play around most. But the way you would have played around it, I guess, would have been to put the South
Captain into the Noble Sac and then run the weapon in. So you still would have lost a 4-1, but you would have had an additional 4-1 on board. Yeah,
Vertigo just choosing to just believe it was a Noble Sacrifice, and unfortunately playing around the secret. And that's really the point of secrets, right, is to create that board tension. And this is a situation now where Indonesia's board is much less menacing because he chose to commit to actually trading into that Tar Creeper, which I didn't even necessarily know. Do you feel you had to?
Even if you throw the Captain in first, testing for Noble Sac, and it's not Noble Sac, you get punished by Redemption, but Captain goes in, Weapon goes in, and then you keep a 4-1 around instead of a 3-1. So I think maybe it was just right to put the Captain in first anyway. One way you get punished by Noble Sacrifice, one way you get punished by Redemption. That's a tough call.
Oh, wow. This could potentially be a large Arcanite Reaper if Indonesia chooses to go this way. They need a large Arcanite Reaper here because China's on 30 health on turn 7 against the Pirate Warrior. They kind of got to get going. And they understand. I would imagine Vertigo and the rest of Indonesia understand that they are at a point where if they don't trade, they face down Spikeridge Steed. They face down a second Megasaur coming down.
But can they afford to trade?
Right.
Because here's 11 points of damage just from the weapon charge and the Captain this turn. You have an additional 14 next turn with the weapon and the Leroy. And then another 8 the following turn. So you can just close out the game over 3 turns if you hit face this turn.
Well, I think the Captain is always going face because it doesn't really... There isn't a beneficial trade for the Captain there, so that was always going to go face. And for Vertigo, now the question becomes, what do I get rid of, if anything, with the Arcanite Reaper? Now, Gentle Megasaur is a choice that you just get rid of it purely based on power because it has no synergies with Paladin. So interesting to choose to leave the Cold Light Seer up there because you're actually playing against a deck that you know likely has 2 copies of War Leader.
Yeah, you're opening yourself up to a punish by War Leader, second Cold Light Seer, second Megasaur,
versus the
just 3 more power on board.
I mean, Megasaur, there are certainly opportunities for things to go awry on you, but it's pretty much just Spike Ridge Steed.
Yeah. If Spike Ridge Steed comes down anyway, you're still feeling pretty bad about that.
I think in that situation, if I wasn't going to just hit face, I would probably have traded with the Murloc,
I agree.
personally. I mean, that's taking caster vision out of the equation. If you're just looking at the cards and all you see is card backs.
One of these synergizes with 5 cards that's left in their deck, and one of these is just a 5/4. Yes, the 5/4 trades with my minions on board, but it's likely that my 3/1 gets cleared anyway, and then we're really left in a very similar position if War Leader were to come down, for instance.
All right, so China hovered over these Cold Lights here with the Spike Ridge Steed for a long time, and at the very least, Indonesia can take from that there is something in hand that buffs a minion, whether it's Spike Ridge Steed, Rockpool Hunter, Blessing of Kings, maybe just China's running Dino Size for some reason.
You know, I've seen weirder things. There's Dino Size.
It's actually a really fun card.
It's great.
In the beginning of the expansion, I was running Dino Size, just one
copy.
copy.
Have you played the Stone Tusk board Dino Size OTK?
I have not.
You adapt for Wind Fury. And then, so Stone Tusk board, Dino Size, adapt for Wind Fury, and you need to have a True Silver equipped. And then somehow Kripparrian made it 30 damage. I don't know. Crypt does what Crypt does, but it was cool.
I was going to say, Crypt Math just makes me generally make the debated face as I watch him do things. But
it's just funny stuff.
All right, chooses to go ahead and put the Arcanite Reaper into the Sunwalker to protect the 5/4. And I like this. I definitely like protecting the 5/4. That's a lot of damage that is going to continue to connect if it is not checked. Ooh. Double War Leader Seer. Mamma mia. That's spicy.
Wowza. Okay, so you full clear. No, you can't full clear because you only have 2 minions that attack. So you
No,
clear.
you leave the 5/4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it better to just
Spike Ridge
Ridge?
Steed. Might be better to just Spike Ridge here.
Spike Ridge, the Seer, run in the Recruit?
Yeah.
Safer. The War Leader's healthier, technically, for the Spike Ridge Steed, but you want to keep that around.
Yeah, I mean, the following turn, you just have some great follow-up in the form of just the second War Leader, Cold Light Seer, so.
Maybe you just rather have 2 additional health on Taunt. Guess you don't need 2 War Leaders on board.
I mean, that requires 2 damage sources to get through from what you can see, which is extremely relevant, so.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
the Seer would have only been at 7, then you could just run in Weapon Swing to kill the additional Taunt. Yeah.
The door is starting to close here on Indonesia. The Spike Ridge Steed is so problematic because not only do you have a high health minion generally, but it leaves behind the secondary 2/6 with taunt. So it requires a lot of resource investment to get through. And Indonesia, as is typical generally, a Pirate Warrior is not sitting on a host of resources.
How many instances do we see where an Arcanite Reaper gets up to an 8-3 and the Pirate Warrior loses the game? That's kind of crazy. But even though this Murloc Paladin is very aggressive, runs a lot of early minions, has to invest quite a bit into pushing early aggression, they have a host of taunt options.
All right, so this is going to allow for Vertigo to get all the way through the Spike Ridge Steed, but he is now sitting on a Fiery War Axe and a Dream.
He had to throw 19 damage into Spike Ridge Steed plus Murloc War Leader.
Yeah, certainly a bad situation for Indonesia, and Omega Zero just has all kind of pressure to follow up here with. Wow, even running Finja. Finja I have not seen too much in Paladin lately.
It's not the most effective.
Right, because you're running more than just the bluegill.
I mean, netting 2 free Murlocs essentially is nice, but a lot of the Murlocs have very valuable battle cries that you would like to utilize. Utilize those battle cries, Rob.
Nope. I won't. I'm not engaging with you. That was not. Nope. Nah.
Do it, Rob.
Nope.
Do it.
I'm going to Dan's game you in real life.
Don't do that, Rob. Don't do it.
All right, well, Vertigo going to need a Brawl here. Not in the deck, though, more than likely. As is his Pirate Warrior. can play down the Frothing Berserker and hit the hero power, but that is going to do for game number 2.
Good
And
job,
now-
Rob.
yeah, right.
You're learning.
Just lined it up. Now
See,
Indonesia.
I acknowledged you,
I'm not. No.
and I complimented.
Nope. Sorry, I'm not.
Well done.
All right, Indonesia now down 0-2, so China needs one more win. And then they go on to stage 2, so Indonesia's going to have to turn it around right now.
Yeah, there is no other time than the present, quite literally. It needs to be right now, or they are not going to be moving on to stage 2. China 2-0. The pressure has been on Indonesia since this match started. I really think the onus was on them to make magic happen and to prove everybody wrong that they could take this series. And so far, it has not been going their way. Not for lack of trying. They went all in with the Druid deck. I don't think that there was really anything else that they could have done that would have looked much better.
I think if we Savage Roar and kill the eye, I don't necessarily want to get super caught up on
Hindsight is 2020, and that was a tough play from Indonesia's standpoint. Sure. There was a very low failure rate for the play that they made in that Druid game. And then with the Warrior, maybe they could have gone a bit of a different direction, but Pyro Warrior is rather straightforward. You clear early minions. The early start wasn't fantastic, and then eventually the Paladin just has more resources than you. So that game couldn't have really gone much differently.
I do think there were a couple of sequencing things that could have been done differently.
Yeah.
We talked about, obviously, how Vertigo tested for the trap tested for the secret with
the weapon.
Yeah, instead of the South Sea Captain. So certainly stuff that if, greater minds than ours were to sit down and watch the videos, I think there are some things Indonesia could have done differently, at least that I'm picking up on. But have to put that in the past because they need to win the next 3 if they are moving on to stage 2. There's going to be Lovely Chook on the Mage versus Joth on the Shaman.
Every shaman that we've seen recently has been the aggressive Bloodlust Doppelgangster Evolved shaman build. We did not see it work out well for Vietnam in the first match of today. I would like to believe that that's what Indonesia's bringing, but certainly Spirit Echo Control Shaman is still a very playable deck. I don't want to get crazy and say it's going to be Elemental Shaman because I think that's definitely the lesser of the 3 builds for Shaman, but they've got some options here.
They do. I think there was a while where the Spirit Echo Shaman was kind of the hot craze, but there are too many situations where it plays against greedier decks, and then it gets the good Spirit Echo, and then that's pretty much all it has. So it doesn't necessarily do enough to compete with some of the greedier decks. It can also be a little bit slow, so Bloodlust Shaman has certainly, I think, more so than a lot of other classes where there's multiple valid archetypes. I think Bloodlust Shaman has taken the clear #1 spot.
I think Spirit Echo Shaman is just also a very difficult deck to play. You really need to get your timing down right because so much interacts with each other, whether it be your hand size versus Spirit Echo on board and how many minions you have, how many times you totem up to get ready for a thing from below to make your Spirit Echoes more valuable, when do you play your Jade minions. There's a lot of intricacies with that deck, whereas Bloodlust Shaman I think is fairly straightforward and has had such positive win rates lately. It's been doing so well that I don't know that there's really a reason not to bring it. There's nothing that really hard counters it so incredibly well that it's just not worth bringing, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to this matchup, though. Lovely Chook, we actually just saw at the Winter Championship in the Bahamas, so he's certainly fresh in our memories. The Bahamas. Yeah. Joth, we haven't necessarily seen him have like the big success in Hearthstone, but Joth comes from a background of competing, I believe it was in StarCraft, Warcraft 3. He's been playing a lot of the different competitive strategy games over the course of his career and has actually had success. I want to say in chess as well. It was like a long list of things Joth is good at.
On his Wikipedia page was Warcraft, StarCraft, chess, like every other competitive, mind game that you can possibly play, Joth has played. So he has a wealth of experience.
For a lot of players' Wikipedia pages, it's kind of like they competed in a cup one time. It was pretty cool.
That's my Wikipedia page.
Joth is basically the equivalent of like a Grubby page, if you know Grubby from back in the day. It's just like, oh, he's really good at a lot of different things and frankly better than you, so don't ever suit up. But Joth has yet to have that big win in Hearthstone, so certainly looking to have it. And I've had the chance to interact with him a little bit. Very competitive individual.
Well, he needs to get some work done right now. Indonesia needs to win the next 3 games in a row to be able to take this series and move on to stage #2 of the Hearthstone Global Games. 2 ice blocks I'm seeing for China. Could be Gunther Mage, could be that Burn Mage.
Yeah. regardless of what it is, the game plan for Indonesia is clear. They need to. This is honestly a pretty solid mulligan. I think you feel comfortable to get rid of the doppelgangster, but you just want to put out as much pressure as possible. And I mean, you can't control the order in which Bloodlust appears in your hands, but you really want to kind of get to that early Bloodlust and leverage the board pressure.
Am I alone in saying that a Secret Mage with 2 copies of Ice Block is unusual? Or could you just be playing some form of Gunther or Burn Mage with a Kirin Tor Mage tech?
Kirin Tor Mage generally speaks to a more aggressive approach, and you tend to see Mirror Entity and, say, Counterspell. So double Ice Block to me is a little bit weird, but I do believe I've seen it before. It's not like completely out of the woods there, but the strength of Kirin Tor Mage is obviously the tempo you get, developing a secret as well as a 4-3 on the same turn, and double Ice Block can be good for the purposes of sticking a secret for Medivh's Valet, Ethereal
True.
Arcanist. There are some synergies there. The Volcanic Potion, though, is certainly the most important card in China's opening hand there. The Shaman deck loves to just go wide with these minions that have 2 health. For a lot of them, some have 1. So if you get that early Volcanic Potion and you shut them down, I have to believe they are in a favored spot. Primordial Glyph, we'll have to see what options they get there. Ignore that card on the right. We don't talk about that one. But the Fireball and Firelands Portal are both worthwhile options.
Poor Sweet Shatter. Fireball for 2 mana is incredibly valuable. You can use that to take out a number of things, but it's very hard to deny Firelands Portal for 5. Especially when Fireball and Firelands are going to remove pretty much the same minions in this deck, and you've got Volcanic Potion, which means you've got some time.
All right, well, the Primal Fin Totem is actually extremely fortuitous if you're trying to play around Volcanic Potion, because you know that it is going to require an extra ping to deal with, or an extra source of 1 damage that China probably doesn't have access to. There's no coin in hand, so realistically you just know that's not a possibility. But this board is otherwise just setting up for a beating at the hands of Volcanic Potion. Yeah, it looks like they're just going to go ahead and rip it. So the Primal Fin Totem does survive. That's the good news for Indonesia. Going to continue to generate tokens. Devolve in this matchup is a lot less powerful than it can be in some other more board-centric matchups.
Yeah.
The Mage, regardless of what the overall 30-card list is just going to look to continue to leverage AoE spells to keep the Shaman off the board while it sets up for the big burn win condition.
The Volcanic Potion, especially because China can Arcanologist and Hero Power next turn, leading into Firelands on 5, lines up very well into killing off this Primal Fin. Sure, they summon 1 additional Murloc, but you get the same job done. An Arcanologist will challenge pretty much anything that comes out from the Shaman, aside from Stonehill and the Manatide.
Yeah, Arcanologist is such an incredibly powerful card. We've seen it in pretty much that and Primordial Glyph in pretty much every single Mage deck. The 2-3 body, I mean, comparing it to Mad Scientist, yes, Mad Scientist just played the secret for you, but the difference between a 2-2 minion and a 2-3 minion in terms of battling for the bird early on and just being a nuisance. It's just, Arcanologist is incredibly powerful.
Plus the additional benefit of if you were playing Mad Scientist and you already had, you know, Ice Block in play, for instance, and Mad Scientist were to pull an additional Ice Block, it can't. Yeah. So that Ice Block is then still in your deck for you to draw, whereas Arcanologist pulls it out of your deck, puts it in your hand, and makes your density of good draws higher in your deck overall. So in some ways, Arcanologist is just better than Mad Scientist, which is crazy to think.
All right, I really would not mind seeing a coin here used, whether it's the Manatide Totem and Hero Power, just to go wider on the board. I would also like to see White Eyes. So a couple different ways you can approach it. It looks like he's going to actually just go ahead and clear the Arcanologist with this Maelstrom Portal. No, he's just making a minion, and he is realizing he has access to Bloodlust on next turn, and he is just saying that these next 2 turns, I'm going to use Bloodlust to win the game.
I mean, if China has to expend a Hero Power this turn to kill the 1-1, I think you're okay with that. You're forcing them to play cleanup, and it's going to be difficult for them to do whole.
We see Joe's just kind of nodding. That was an extremely good outcome for the Firelands Portal. And going back to the strength of Primordial Glyph for a minute, that is frankly one of the things that makes it so powerful is when you're planning out your turn after a Primordial Glyph has been used, you have to basically start considering a second set of math wherein, okay, Firelands Portal, I know it costs 7 mana. There's a chance it's just in there for 5 mana. And usually where this really comes to punish board-centric decks is in the form of Blizzard and Flame Strike Reach.
Yeah, that mana displacement is, I think, more valuable than anybody thought. looking at how Primordial Glyph would be in this meta. Obviously, we'd seen it in the past with Unstable Portal, which was a random effect ultimately. So you never had truly crazy results from Unstable Portal, at least not most of the time. But with Primordial Glyph, Discover is such a powerful mechanic. The Mage class spells are so powerful, and then you combine that with the 2-mana discount, it makes situations that shouldn't be possible.
Oh, I'm worried about Indonesia's future here with this counter spell up, because they do not realistically have a fantastic means of testing for it. And they might feel like they're in a situation where, you know, they have to use a Jade Lightning on this turn.
You could test with a Devolve and then Jade Lightning for follow-up on the Kirin Tor. That does protect the majority of your board state.
And the thing is, when you see the Kirin Tor Mage, a little bell should go off in your head that this actually, there's a good chance this could just be counterspell. Because generally, whether it's the, you know, Burn Mage George C put out, whether it's Classic Freeze Mage, whether it's Gunther Mage, you're really not seeing Kirin Tor Mage. And Kirin Tor Mage usually tells you it's going to be a little bit more aggressive. All right, so they're going to go ahead and use the Devolve here. They're going to go ahead and spot it out. And then they can use the Jade Lightning. Jade Lightning only going to make a 1/1 Jade Golem for now, though, so still a hill for Indonesia to climb up, even though they have the board at the moment.
I do want to point out, really nice sequencing by Indonesia there, running the White Eyes into the Tundra Rhino before devolving. If the devolve had resolved, it's very likely that the 4-drop minion from the Tundra Rhino would have had more attack than the Tundra Rhino itself.
Yeah, really well done by Indonesia. All right, another Seeker comes down, and oh man, Midi's Valet just lines up perfectly into getting rid of the White Eyes. And again, Indonesia has a pretty awkward hand here. We saw Vietnam have something earlier. Nelio had a very similar hand where it's just the double Bloodlust there. And I mean, yeah, they can keep toteming and discount the things from below, try to get an Evolve going, but
even if Joth is able to set up a situation where he can deal 21 damage with these Bloodlusts and a board state, Ice Block is up. So he's going to need then some additional form of damage through what's likely to be an efficient board clear from Lovely Chook.
Alakir is pretty strong here.
Yeah.
That
rhymed too.
Alakir obviously doesn't synergize with the Bloodlust, but individually it's just a bunch of damage. And yeah, no time to totem. Got to get the thing from below going now. You are staring down a 5/5, and the later it gets, the more horrifying tools the mage has access to.
So, do you Medivh the Guardian on what looks to be a pretty free turn, or is Mana Wyrm Firelands Portal just too stinking good to pass up?
I think it's too good, but more importantly, you understand that the only way you potentially lose this game is if you give the deck time to get on the board. So now he has complete control of the board, gets Lyra off of the Firelands Portal, and Lyra not necessarily going to provide a ton of resources based on what we can see in China's hand, but the threat of Lyra is very much not what Indonesia wants the mage to have.
No, the last thing that you want is the mage gaining additional health, which is a very real possibility when you have Lyra on the board and, you know, cards like Frostbolt. You can Frostbolt into any number of priest spells that will heal.
Especially that Mana Wyrm on the board, just continuing to get value.
Yeah.
Now, Alakir could come down and go ahead and just get rid of the Mana Wyrm, but it's a really hollow victory. You are playing an 8-mana card down to essentially get rid of the Mana Wyrm and do 3 damage to your opponent's face.
It's like 2 lightning bolts for 8 mana.
And again, China's just like, oh yeah, man, what do you want to do after this win? You want to go get dinner? Go get dinner.
No, I think Lyra is definitely the bigger threat here, and you still will likely see the Mana Wyrm trade into this Alakir, so certainly much more valuable than 3 damage to the face. Yeah, 3rd Firelands Portal of the game. You could also just Alexstrasza your opponent and trade the Mana Wyrm, hit him down to 10 with the Cabal Crystal Runner, and represent lethal for next turn.
Yeah, look at the faces of Indonesia. This is just, things are not going their way in these games.
This has not been their series at all. Okay, so put him down to 13, but get to keep your 5/1 body on board.
I mean, it's a good body, the 5/5. The test, of course, if it's a good body, is 5/5 adds up to 10. So,
it does.
Yeah, it's a good body. But yeah, this is just a ton of damage coming down facing Joth, and no healing. you can make a taunt, but it's kind of the old escalator to nowhere. At this point, you just try to build the biggest possible board you can, but they understand they're absolutely on their last leg and 100% being pushed to the brink.
So Thing from Below can come down here, and then you think you're only facing down 11 damage, but we know this game's all over.
Yeah, China is going to 3-0 this series.
More importantly, China is going to secure their spot in Stage 2 of the Hearthstone Global Games.
All right, there's the Flame Strike. Joth is going to know that's going to be it, and Indonesia's run in the Hearthstone Global Games comes to a close here. It's been a great story, and it's been a lot of fun watching them perform, but unfortunately this series just did not go the way they needed it to, and yeah, China now moves on to Stage 2, much to the expectations of essentially everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking about in the beginning of the series.
It really was. The onus was on Indonesia to prove the rest of the world wrong and to prove that they have what it takes to move on to Stage 2 and take out one of the giants of the Hearthstone scene. Ultimately, they fell quite short. This was a bit of a stomp from China. A couple of things that Indonesia could have potentially done differently. Whether or not it would have changed the course of the series, impossible to really know, considering everything that occurred from then on out. But from what we saw, China very confidently took that win and has definitely earned their spot in Stage 2.
Yeah, just a little bit. I don't necessarily want to pile on here, but I think there was just maybe a little bit of shaky play from Indonesia. This was certainly a big moment for them, as we've been talking about the whole series. It was do or die, and unfortunately did not manage the do part. Whereas China, everything they did just looked confident. They understood what they had to do, and those are three players. Obviously, Nightwalk unable to make it tonight, but those are still three players who are just extremely good at the game and extremely high IQ, have competed at the highest level. So, yeah, 3-0 in favor of China. Really hope to see Indonesia continuing to be growing their scene, I guess, on the global stage, and we'll have the opportunity to kind of monitor how they do in the coming months.
Yeah, they're not only growing their scene within Indonesia, but within Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia has put together quite some good results in this tournament, and we'll be moving quite a few teams into Stage 2. So while Indonesia will not be one of them, they have put themselves on the map, I would like to say, and they've certainly benefited from this experience. But now we can see how Group A has played out. China, with that dominating 3-0 performance, has actually secured themselves the #1 spot based off of that game record.
Yeah, what a night. You're fighting for a top 3 finish, and then you actually end up with a #1 finish, at least due to game record, as all 3 top teams are 3-2.
Look at these match records. 3 3-2s, 3 2-3s. I don't think we've got a closer group.
No, it was an extremely close group, and we were talking all throughout the weeks how things were going to come down to the wire specifically for this group because there are so many talented teams. I mean, Sweden not making it through with a record of 2-3, that's just barely, and Sweden is frankly one of the most talented teams in terms of overall personnel in the world. But to your point earlier about Southeast Asia making it through, I just want to list off the teams now that are representing Southeast Asia that have made it through. South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Philippines, China, and New Zealand, for the purposes of this tournament, were listed as Asia Pacific. So yeah, that is a really strong showing, again, from a region where we haven't necessarily seen too much of their competitive success, at least on the Hearthstone Championship Tour.
Yeah, I mean, we always have for the Hearthstone Championship Tour, Europe, Americas, Asia Pacific. Europe and Americas tend to feed off of each other and really grow as a unit. And then Asia Pacific has always been an outlier. It's a tournament that, as casters, we go into saying, what can we expect from these guys? What are they going to bring? Is it going to be stuff that we saw from Americas and Europe? Are they going to grow based off of that? Or are they just going to bring something completely from left field? And to see them come into this tournament and really put up some fantastic results and put them on the same level as representatives from Europe and the Americas, that's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's 7 teams from Asia Pacific. That's 4 teams from LATAM. So of the 24 teams advancing, that's 11 teams right now that are not from at least North America or Europe.
Yeah, so roughly half, a little bit less than half, but almost. And that is going to be a very diverse Stage 2. This is the Global Games. 48 countries came into this, and to see it still be a Global Games going into Stage 2, I don't think that we really could have done much better.
Now, I'm very excited about that, but let's go ahead and take a look at how everything panned out this evening. We opened the night with Mexico beating Vietnam 3-1, securing that #1 seed in Group G. So shout out to Mexico. Certainly saying they would deliver, and then in the clutch doing just that. And then moved on to China versus Indonesia. And China said enough games. We came here. We want to go to stage 2, and they did exactly that. So we now have the complete group standing. So we're going to walk through each of them. Cora, why don't you hit us up with Group A?
All right. So obviously we just saw China with a 3-0 over Indonesia. They have jumped to the #1 spot in Group A, followed by Bulgaria, who I don't think a lot of people expected too much from, but they came out very strong, finished #2, and then my pick to take it all, Brazil, one of the representatives from South America, in #3.
Yeah, that was a very good explanation of Group A. Group B, however, Netherlands and United States at the top. I don't think anyone expected any differently. I think maybe the only expectation that people would have had otherwise was United Kingdom and Romania advancing. Unfortunately, Romania just barely kept out by Peru's miracle run, and if you weren't necessarily keeping super up to speed on that, in the last 2 series Peru played, first against the United States and then against the United Kingdom, Peru had to go 6-0. They could not lose any matches. Otherwise, Romania made it through. So when we were talking about it before, it seemed all but a formality that Romania was going to go through. Shout out to Peru. That's really, I think, one of the major narratives that people should take from stage 1 is the miracle run of Peru.
And then taking a look at Group C, New Zealand sitting in at the #1 spot. Again, another underdog of a country, but coming in and putting up fantastic results. Austria in the #2 spot, and Argentina, another South American team with some fantastic former HCT representatives, sitting in at #3. Russia just missing the cut to make it out, in Australia as well. So 2 other big names in this tournament not making it through.
Yeah, certainly surprising to see some of that. In Group D, South Korea came in, and we saw them falter a little bit early on, but then they turned it right around, went 4-1, and were just as dominant as I expected, or I think most people expected South Korea to be with that roster. Greece managed to right the ship after some early stumbles, and Hungary rounds us out of the top 3. Otherwise, Hong Kong kind of came in here, and this was an opportunity for them to learn. They were led by Yulsik. The expectations were more that they were going to grow and not necessarily going to have much success otherwise. Portugal and Slovakia rounding out Group D.
And then looking at Group E, both Israel and Italy finishing with 4-1 match records, and then Norway going to round out this top 3 with a 3-2 match record. This is not one of the more star-studded groups, but it is one that I did enjoy watching. Chile and Japan, I think, were 2 that I would have put up in the top 3 initially, and ultimately they're going to finish in the 5th and 6th spot. So this is definitely a group to watch moving forward.
All right, in Group F, my pick to win the whole thing, Canada made it through 4-1. Malaysia, another one of those stories that people were not necessarily expecting, managed 4-1. They had an extremely strong performance. Shout out to them as well for having a great infrastructure and a great team chemistry. They worked really hard to get that. Belgium managed to eke out that #3 spot. Denmark, France, and Kazakhstan not making it through. I know for French fans, that is absolutely not something you would have expected.
No, definitely not. And looking at Group G, which we just saw round out tonight, Mexico going to take the #1 spot with their 4-1 match record. They didn't expect a lot from themselves. The rest of the world didn't know what to expect, but they have come in and put up some fantastic results, and they have proven themselves to be among the best from North America. And then Taiwan in #2, serious heavy hitters on that team. Wouldn't expect anything less. I've really enjoyed getting to watch Singapore over the last couple of weeks. There's a couple of great characters on that team, and they've also put up some great results. A little disappointing for Poland and Turkey. And then, of course, Vietnam had some poor luck in this tournament. Hopefully they'll come back stronger next time.
All right, Group H, again, the final group of Stage 1, Ukraine and Czech Republic, absolutely just 2 powerhouse countries. You really expected them to come in and do work, and they certainly lived up to that hype, which is important because not all teams were necessarily able to do that. Philippines, another Southeast Asian country that made it through with a 2-3 record. Unfortunately, the powerhouse team, my second pick to win it all forever, Belarus, did not make it through. And Croatia, and then Germany. Germany certainly had some roster shuffles coming into this. There was originally some different members on the team, but they ended up kind of repopulating with a group that looked really powerful on paper all the same. I would argue maybe actually a little stronger. And then, unfortunately, Germany was just not quite able to make it through. They played some kind of crazy decks in the very early stages of the Hearthstone Global Games and, just weren't able to make it through. But to go 1-4, I definitely don't think that was the expectation for anyone from Germany.
I think a couple of their team members sort of checked out after a bit, maybe weren't playing as much Hearthstone as they had previously, and ultimately Germany was one of the sadder stories of the Hearthstone Global Games for me personally. I expected big things from them, even after all of the controversy, and ultimately they didn't deliver.
All right, this is the end of Stage 1, however. It has been a ton of fun bringing you the action these past 10 weeks. We will be back for Stage 2, kicking it off from the UK office with our lads over there. Stage 2 begins. 24 teams remain. Who will survive and advance to Stage 3? We'll have to find out. But for myself, Cora, and everyone here at the ESL Burbank studio, thank you so much for watching and have a good night.